Can I start by paying tribute to my friend Jim Wallace, one of the great Scottish Liberals, and offer our thoughts and prayers to his family and many friends. Jim devoted his life to public service, his Christian faith, and the cause of liberalism. But, Mr. Speaker, his judgment wasn't always impeccable, for it was Jim who gave me my first job in politics. We will miss him.
Jim's family and my party have been overwhelmed by the kindness shown to us in these difficult days. We are heart-sore at his loss, but the outpouring of love and respect that has come forth from all sides of this chamber has been such a balm at this difficult time. And what does the Lord require of you but to act justly and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God? Presiding Officer, this verse from the book of Micah was read to Church of Scotland congregations the country over this Sunday. It's just a part of the normal rhythms of the Kirk at this time of year. And yet, those words speak to the qualities and life choices of Jim Wallace, perhaps more than any other passage in Scripture. Jim was a man of profound Christian faith. The values in those words speak to so much about his politics and his dedication to public service. It was in Elphinstone Hall in the University of Aberdeen during the referendum campaign of 1997 to establish this Parliament that I first heard Jim Wallace speak. I was just a student at the time, but that night he inspired me to recognise that I was a Liberal, that I absolutely agreed that there should be a Scottish Parliament, and that I wanted, one day, to have the opportunity to serve in it. Presiding Officer, the torrent of praise that has rightly been offered about Jim this weekend focused on the many achievements he made in the high offices that he held. But it is often forgotten just how much about this place we owe to Jim. He was central to the Constitutional Convention that made the case for devolution, and with the referendum won, became an architect of our reconvened Parliament and of modern Scotland. He was a details man. He took great pride in, for want of a better word, the geekery of its formation, in helping to draft the conventions and the standing orders that we still observe today. He loved this chamber. He was so proud of his involvement in its establishment and what it would go on to achieve. And, Presiding Officer, so much of that was made possible by his ability to work across party lines, and in particular, his friendship with the late Donald Dewar. Jim is celebrated for his ability to lay aside political tribalism and to reach for the better nature of his adversaries. There is such rancour in our politics today. We could all learn something about his approach and lean into his legacy of doing politics through grace and reconciliation. While he was a man of towering intellect, he was largely bereft of technical know-how or any sort of coordination. Indeed, Rosie, his wife, describes him as being completely hornless, discovering him one afternoon astride the ride-on lawnmower, having gone up and down their garden for hours, not realising that the filter was blocked and he hadn't clipped a single blade of grass. Or the first day of our election campaign in 2003, which we kicked off with a balloon launch. But at the moment of their release, the cameras of the nation's media were not trained on the cascade of golden balloons ascending into the stratosphere, but rather they were focused on the Deputy First Minister of Scotland, who had become hopelessly entangled in the fishing net we'd used to collect them. Indeed, our press officer, Neil McKinnon, literally had to rip a button from his suit jacket to set him free. But we didn't need Jim for his coordination or for his technical know-how. We needed him for his grasp of political strategy, for his stoicism, for his ability to discern the true north of our liberal values. Nicol, Tavish, Willie and I, as his successors in leadership, have all turned to Jim for counsel and support. It is why I had no hesitation in appointing him as chair of our Scottish general election campaign in 2024. I am heartily glad that he lived to see the revival of our party and played such a role in it, and the best election result for Liberals in his lifetime. But while Jim was a mainstay of support to us, he could not have achieved anything without the bedrock of support that he received from his family, and in particular, his wife, Rosie. I love this story of how they met. It was the summer of 1979, and Jim had almost forgotten about the Shakespeare-themed fancy dress party he'd been invited to in the neighbouring flat. It was after midnight when he finally remembered, so he shoved a couple of lilac bush branches down the back of his jumper and he knocked the door. Rosie, in full costume, this is the first time they met, answered the door exclaiming, "I'm Titania, Queen of the Fairies. Who on earth are you?" To which he replies, "I'm Burnham Wood, come to Dunsinane." Rosie, Helen, Claire and Neil, thank you for helping him to become the giant that he was and for sharing him with us. We have so much love for you, and we will continue to hold you in the light that shines. Presiding Officer Jim Wallace acted justly. He loved mercy, and he walked humbly with God. We are all the poorer now he is gone, but this Parliament and this country are immeasurably richer because he lived.
Many of us aspire to be a good politician, to do good and be a good person. More times than not, we fall short. Jim Wallace was a good man who saw his role in life to do good things, and he did, and they will last. With great sorrow, we have been denied the opportunity of hearing a valedictory speech in this House from Jim. He would have been characteristically modest. We can perhaps be a little immodest on his behalf as a now profoundly missed absent friend. From his early political days in the lowlands of Scotland, he triumphed in the most northerly. When he was elected, many said he was the MP for Joe Grimond's seat. But in short order, we referred to Jim Wallace's Orkney and Shetland. As MP, MSP and peer, he saw serving in Parliament as the means by which good things can be done, not the end in itself. He was what a parliamentarian should be. When speaking in Parliament Hall on the day of the opening of the Scottish Parliament in 1999, Jim was achieving his ambition and the dreams of many in delivering what Gladstone couldn't a century before. He said to all those newly elected MSPs, "As the people's representatives, we should never forget the hopes kindled by this historic opportunity." He approached his role to meet those hopes as the first Liberal in office since the Second World War with zeal. Land reform, law reform, social reform, education reform, prison reform. Radical but workable, and all have endured. None reversed. Jim was a reformer, but he knew for reform to last it had to be done well. He said of the new Holyrood, "Our Parliament must be open and inclusive, willing to consult and willing to listen." That sentiment embodied his own approach to politics. Jim could be exceptionally partisan, though, but only with football. A determined blue nose, supporter of Glasgow Rangers, he was dutifully but distractedly carrying out one of his last duties as Deputy First Minister before succeeded by my noble friend Lord Stephen in May 2005 at the launch of the Promoting Unst Renewable Energy project on a day ironically too windy for anything to work. He was distracted as it was unknown to him who was winning the Scottish League. But as his then private secretary subtly gave the thumbs up during the non-switching on event, Jim then became, in the words of his private secretary, the happiest I've ever seen him. Jim was a very confident Liberal, but very comfortable with others who weren't. He felt cooperating with others didn't diminish his position or dilute his beliefs. Rather, it allowed progress to be made for the better end. Agreement with others for Jim was to get traction, longevity. We all knew reaching agreement was Jim's strength, but he approached it always from a granite set of principles. I once discussed a tricky time in the Scottish Parliament on a controversial law reform measure, and he said to me, "The test is when you defend the human rights of the people you hate." Although that word was never associated with Jim, his words have become my test. When he gave the first Charles Kennedy Memorial Lecture, he mourned the loss of a great friend prematurely. In the lecture, he remarked on their close friendship. There was much camaraderie, much political discussion and analysis, even intrigue and much fun. The same for us with you, Jim. Jim was literally admirable. A political determination tempered by real kindness, a serious of purpose sweetened by wry humour. Jim would tell of his period as Justice Minister in 2002 when Nelson Mandela visited the Lockerbie bomber in jail and at a global press conference criticised the way he was being kept and by extension Jim himself. On hearing the rather worrying condemnation of Jim by the world's most venerated man, his teenage daughter said, "Did Nelson Mandela just attack Dad? That's cruel." Engaging in a policy discussion with Jim was a thrilling and often quite intimidating experience. Prodigious intellect, phenomenal memory, confidence of argument, and the ability to deploy cutting wit like a sharpened ski-and do. You needed to be on your game, or your game was lost, as I learnt on too many an occasion. I would start off fully confident of my argument, and not long after, accepting an early defeat, I would just pour us lots more whiskey and would enjoy the man and admire his abilities so comfortably worn. Those in law, civil service and politics would see the same. He excelled in company while never dominating it. And for those of us who knew him well, his ability to doze off mid-discussion, awaken and display his remarkable acuity as before was a skill to behold. Jim loved serving as moderator and said that he was more in awe in addressing the Quirks General Assembly than any of the 3 parliamentary chambers he mastered. On taking office as moderator, he said, "At all levels, and not least in our upper echelons, we should be ready to take risks and to do what is right." For Jim, the risk would be calculated, prepared for, researched, tested, but that preparation didn't dent the determination for boldness of thought and action. He led my Scottish party, he led government, led the Kirk and in law, and he also led these benches, not by diktat, Jim knew this to be a futile exercise for a group of liberals, but through intellect, argument, respect, and a reasoned, methodical approach. We were lucky to have a colleague we admired, but one who made it easy to love him too. John Buchan wrote of another great Scot words which were also appropriate for Jim: perfectly honest, perfectly fearless, and perfectly true. I grieve for Rosie, Claire, and Helen, and the grandchildren, who will have so many years ahead without Jim. But I say with love, we are ever so grateful that you allowed us to share Jim in our lives. Jim was a good politician and a good person who strove for and did good. The country is better and lives are improved as a result of what he did. He was the best of examples of how politics can and should be the most honourable of callings. His faith was deep, and he knew that when his time had come, he would be going to a good place. That time is the wrong time, far too soon a time, but that place is now extremely lucky to have him. Yeah.